I have stood in the grand hall of the Galactic Conclave 47 times. I know the exact sound the chamber makes when 1,000 alien delegates shift in their seats at once. I know the way the blue light from the central star map catches the crystalline skin of the Vreth and turns them into living chandeliers. I know the smell of the recycled air, filtered through 17 different atmospheric preferences, settling into something that smells faintly of warm metal and old stone. I know this place the way a soldier knows the field before the battle, not with love, but with perfect attention. My name is Saren Voss. I am a commander in Earth's diplomatic corps, which is a title that sounds more impressive than it is. In the Conclave's hierarchy, Earth's diplomatic rank sits somewhere between the Marathi, who communicate entirely through color shifts, and the Pelun, a species of coral-like organisms who have not moved voluntarily in 3 centuries, but are considered excellent listeners. We are young, we are new, we are, by every official metric, small. This suits us perfectly. The session that changed everything began on an ordinary morning by station time. The Karath ambassador, a creature built like a collapsed star given a body, filed a dominion claim against 3 of our colony worlds before I had finished my first cup of coffee. He did it casually, the way someone flicks a crumb off a table. He filed the paperwork, straightened the ceremonial sash across his enormous chest, and looked at our delegation with the patient, almost bored expression of someone who already knows how the story ends. Under conclave law, a dominion claim is a formal territorial challenge. Any species with a military rating of capable, or above, can contest it. Earth's military rating has been officially listed as negligible since the day we joined the conclave, 200 years ago. The Karath knew this. Every delegate in the room knew this. 3 of our colony worlds, home to about 9 million people, had just been legally claimed by a species that had already consumed 12 civilizations the way a fire consumes paper. I sat very still. Around me, I heard the whispers begin. I heard the Vreth delegate seated 2 rows behind me make the soft clicking sound that, in his culture, means something like, "How unfortunate." I heard someone from the Pelican observer block begin composing what was probably a very thorough and deeply useless letter of sympathy. I reached into my jacket pocket and pressed the small transmitter I had carried for 11 years without ever using. I sent 1 word back to Earth. The word was Sable. The reply came in 14 seconds, 1 word in return. Ready. Someone had been waiting. They had been waiting, in shifts, for 200 years. I folded my hands on the table in front of me and said nothing, while the Karath ambassador accepted congratulations from 3 different delegations. I watched him accept a glass of something celebratory from the Vreth, that same delegate who had patted my shoulder like I was a clever child the first time we met. I watched him laugh. I let him laugh. Some weapons require patience before they fire, and patience was the oldest human skill. Let me tell you what the galaxy does not know. 40,000 years ago, in the time before writing, before cities, before anything the modern world would recognize as civilization, a group of our ancestors found something in the ice. Not in Antarctica as it exists now, but under a shelf of rock and frozen ocean that would not see daylight again for another 10,000 years. They were small people by our standards, and the world was cold and loud with things that wanted to eat them. But they were curious, the way humans have always been ferociously, inconveniently curious. And when they found a wall of metal in the ice that did not match any rock they had ever seen, they did not run. They stayed. They built fires next to it. Eventually, they began to touch it. The ship, because that is what it was, did not respond immediately. Our best researchers believe it was waiting too, in its own way, measuring something about the creatures pressing their warm hands against its hull. It waited through generations of those first people. Their children came back. Their grandchildren. And then, about 38,000 years ago, something changed. The ship let them in. What happened inside we know only from art. Cave paintings in 17 locations across what is now 4 continents, all depicting the same object, all drawn in the same style despite being separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years. A long, dark vessel, stars around it, and small figures inside it, standing upright, hands raised, as if in conversation. They could not use the ship. Not then, The knowledge required to operate it was so far beyond them that the ship itself seemed to understand this, and was content to simply be known. But it shared something with those early visitors, something passed through touch and time, and a relationship built across millennia. A blueprint not of the ship itself, but of the kind of mind that would eventually be able to understand it. It was building us, slowly, patiently. Over the following centuries, as humanity grew, and learned, and burned things down, and rebuilt them, they kept finding more. 17 ships in total, distributed across 6 continents and 3 ocean floors, all made of the same impossible material, all breathing in their quiet way, all waiting. Every metal in the Conclave's database has a known origin, a star system it came from, an age that can be calculated. The material of these hulls broke every instrument we used to date it. Our best estimate, after decades of study, was that the alloy predated the formation of our solar system by approximately 2 billion years. Someone had built these ships before our sun existed. The weapons were stranger than the hull. They did not fire anything. They had no barrel, no chamber, no directed energy emitter that our physicists could identify. What they did, as far as we could determine from centuries of careful study, was alter the geometry of space at a chosen coordinate. Not destroy, not damage. Simply make a location in space briefly behave according to different rules, rules that any object present at that location would find very inconvenient. When humanity finally made contact with the wider galaxy and discovered there were a great many species out there, many of them larger and older and with far more ships than us, we made a decision. We buried them. Not out of fear, though fear played a role. We buried them because we understood that revealing a fleet of 17 indestructible, physics-defying warships on the first day of school was not diplomacy. It was a declaration. And we did not yet know enough about the galaxy to know who our real friends were, who our real enemies might become, and most importantly, who else might be looking for these ships. So we moved them, quietly, over 40 years of the most carefully managed operation in human history. We transported all 17 ships to uninhabited moons in 6 separate systems, buried them under kilometers of ice and rock, sealed the crypts with materials that absorbed every scan frequency we knew of, and then sent our people into the conclave with empty hands and careful eyes and a military rating of negligible. We were patient. We had learned patience from the ships themselves. Back in the Grand Hall, the celebration around the Kareth ambassador was beginning to wind down. I was watching the clock. 11 light minutes to the nearest relay. Then the signal would cascade through the network we had quietly built over the past century. The network no one had noticed, because it moved no data anyone could detect. Only small pulses in a frequency range that fell between 2 bands the conclave monitored, like whispering in the gap between 2 conversations. The conclave's deep space sensor network registered 17 simultaneous anomalies at approximately the same moment the Kareth ambassador sat back down and began reviewing, I imagine, the property acquisition forms for our colony worlds. The anomalies were moving. The chamber did not go quiet immediately. It went confused first, which is louder. Hundreds of delegates checking their personal displays, asking their aides for confirmation, comparing data with their neighbors. The Vreth delegate behind me made a sound I had never heard a Vreth make before. Then the main display at the center of the hall updated, and the confusion turned into something else entirely. 17 objects, each approximately the size of a mid-range city block, moving at velocities that should have been physically impossible under every model of physics currently accepted by the conclave's scientific body. Not accelerating toward those speeds, not building up, not producing any detectable form of propulsion energy, simply moving at those speeds, the way a thought moves in a mind, because they had decided to. The Kareth fleet, 40 warships that had never been defeated in 2 centuries of aggressive expansion, moved to intercept. I watched the feed with my hands still folded on the table. 40 Kareth warships against 17 ancient vessels that had been waiting under ice and rock for a chance to be what they were built to be. The Kareth opened fire first. They were a warring species. They always opened fire first. Their weapons were excellent by galactic standards, directed plasma at intensities that could split a small moon. Every shot curved, not deflected, not absorbed, not blocked by a shield. The shots simply followed the new local geometry of space and curved away from their targets, as if the ships had never been there to aim at. The beams arced out into open space, like water around stones in a stream, and vanished into the dark. Our ships did not fire back. What they did was move into a formation around the Karath fleet, not surrounding them aggressively, not moving in to destroy or damage. They formed a geometric pattern at precise intervals around the fleet, and then they simply held position. From the sensor data, the Conclave's analysts would later spend 3 years trying to understand the geometry of that formation. It was not any shape found in known mathematics, it was something older. Inside that formation, every Karath weapon stopped working. Not damaged, not destroyed. Stopped, the way a voice stops when it enters a room where speaking is not done. Every engine on every Karath warship reduced to minimum power, enough to maintain life support, not enough to move. 40 warships hung in space like ornaments, perfectly preserved, entirely helpless, their crews alive and unharmed, and completely unable to do anything about their situation. The Dominion claim was withdrawn in 11 minutes. The chamber was standing. Every delegate, every species represented in that vast hall, was on their feet. The Vreth behind me had all 6 limbs pressed flat against his body, which I had learned was the Vreth equivalent of being unable to speak. The Karath ambassador had not moved from his seat. His celebratory glass was still on the table in front of him. A delegate I did not recognize called out across the chamber, asking how old the ships were. I turned in my seat. The hall went quiet enough that I could hear the ventilation system. I told them our best estimate, 2 billion years before the formation of our solar system, give or take a few 100 million years. The silence that followed was the most satisfying sound I have ever heard in my life. What came after was long and complicated, because diplomacy is always long and complicated, and because the revelation that humanity had been sitting on a fleet of pre-galactic warships for 40,000 years raised a number of questions that took some time to work through. There were formal inquiries. There were demands for full disclosure. There were 3 emergency sessions of the conclave that ran past every scheduled time limit by hours. I told them what we chose to tell them: the discovery, the centuries of careful study, the decision to wait. I was honest about the waiting. I explained, as clearly as I could in terms every species represented could understand, that humanity had not hidden the fleet out of aggression or malice or ambition. We had hidden it because we were afraid of what we did not understand, and we had waited until understanding caught up with fear. This, I told the chamber, was something humans had been doing since the first of us looked up at the night sky and wondered what was looking back. I did not tell them what the ships had begun transmitting to us since they woke. The moment the fleet activated, all 17 ships began broadcasting a signal directed inward, toward our systems, in a language that was not any human language, but that our communication teams were already beginning to map. We had been studying these ships for 40,000 years and had learned a great deal. The ships, apparently, had been studying us for the same length of time, and were now of the opinion that we were ready to learn what they actually knew. Some secrets require more patience still. The Vreth ambassador requested a private meeting with me 2 days after the session. I accepted. I arrived early and sat down and let him come to me, which was a small thing, but small things matter when everything else has changed. He sat down across from me and was quiet for a long time. Then he said that his people had believed, genuinely and without cruelty, that humanity was young. I told him that we were young. 40,000 years of keeping a secret was nothing measured against 2 billion years of silence. We were young, and we were learning, and the ships were teaching us, and we were only at the very beginning of understanding what we had been given, and what it meant, and who had given it to us and why. He asked me if it frightened me. I thought about those first people, pressing their hands against a wall of impossible metal in the ice of an ancient world, feeling something ancient and patient and enormous pressing gently back. I thought about every generation since that kept the faith without knowing what they were keeping it for. I thought about 14 seconds, and one word, and a fleet rising from frozen moons, like a memory the universe had stored and not yet finished speaking. I told him no. I told him it felt like coming home. I stood again in the grand hall the following morning, in the same spot where I had stood 47 times before. The same blue light from the star map. The same smell of warm metal and old stone. The same Vreth delegate moving through the crowd toward me. He did not reach for my shoulder this time. He stopped in front of me and lowered all 6 limbs, slowly, into the deep formal bow, his culture reserved for those who were very, very old. I bowed back. Outside the station windows, 17 ships held their quiet orbit, older than the stars around them, waiting, as they had always waited, for whatever came next.